anyway. Our first sighting takes us back to 1991. A gentleman was doing a night shift at one of our bakeries in the town centre. And at dawn, when he finished his shift, he struggled up the steep hill that some of you have probably struggled up this evening. When he got to the corner there, which is the Magna Carta pub, but in those days it used to be a restaurant, he tells us he heard a tremendous noise, and he felt that he had to jump backwards out of the way, otherwise he was going to be run over. He looked to his right. Coming through that archway from the cathedral was an enormous black horse. He tells us it was galloping so fast he could actually see sparks coming up from the cobbles where his iron shoes were catching on them. And smoke, steam was pouring out of its nostrils. It was riding that hard. It passed him, it got to about here, when he thought he saw somebody stand up in the stirrups, and he distinctly heard somebody shout, "Open up in the name of the king!" And horse and rider galloped straight into the castle, through the gates, which were, of course, closed, just as they are this evening. Now, this gentleman decided he wasn't going to tell anybody what he'd seen, and we wouldn't have known anything about it if it hadn't been for about 10 years ago. We put a little piece in our local paper, The Echo. We said we're doing a bit of a revamp on the Ghost Walk. Question is just over there. It's Brown's Pie Shop. For those of you visiting Willington this weekend, I draw attention to the blue plaque over the word shop. Now that commemorates the visit to the city of Lincoln and the staying in that building of T.E. Lawrence. Now that is Lawrence of Arabia, not the Lady Chatterley's lover bloke. Sometimes people mix them up. But our first ghostly sighting takes place in the upper room. You can see the little window in the roof there. The only access up there is a trapdoor and a ladder. I'm told if you're quick and very quiet, as you go up the ladder, you may hear the sound of coins chinking together. When you look up, you may see coins passing through the air as if they're being passed from one hand to another, but no hands are actually visible. And as you step into the room, these coins drop to the floor, roll into the corners and disappear. So maybe somebody was caught up there with their hand in the till. The next sighting's on the room below. That's actually the kitchen of the restaurant. Chef there used to be a lad called Mark. He told us that often he'd be in there quite early on in the morning, before the rest of the staff. Draw attention to it now because it is one of the oldest buildings in the Vale area. Parts of it go back to the reign of King Richard II, whose heraldic emblem on his shield was a white deer, a white hart. That's why it's called that. Being such an old building, it's got quite a lot of ghostly activity. There's a sight in one of the bedrooms, I wouldn't want to come across it. It's of a young girl. She's described as about 13 or 14. She's wearing a long dress, a pinny and a cap, and she's cowering in the corner of the bedroom. The legend tells us that she was a hotel chambermaid and that the hotel rat catcher, a much older gentleman, took a bit of a shine to her. He followed her while she was working, cornered her in the bedroom and attempted to press his advances. She didn't like this at all. She tried to fight him off. He wasn't a man to take no for an answer, and he drew a knife from under his coat and stabbed her to death 10 times. And the sight you see in that room is the little girl's face as the rat catcher stands over her for the 10th and last time. I should point out, anybody here staying at the White Hart this evening? Yes, we quite often get visitors. Just to let you know, the staff won't be telling you, for obvious reasons, if you've been given that bedroom. But they all know it as the sad room, and 3 people have committed suicide in there since 1962. So if you get back tonight and start feeling a bit gloomy, nip down to the bar, because I don't want any more stories to go with the ones I've got already. spire was built in the 14th century at the request of the clergy of Lincoln Cathedral, who wanted to completely enclose the area around here, keep out the peasant rabble of Lincoln. From some of the stories I've heard, you were a lot safer on the other side of the gate. In the 12th century, a sub-dean called Blomfield was actually attacked while he was at prayer at an altar in the cathedral by one of the dean's servants. This servant was dragged out of the building into this courtyard area here. Without any formal trial or anything whatsoever, they tied him to a horse's tail. The horse was then whipped all the way up Cannock Hill, only a distance from here, dragging the man behind it. And when they got there, what was left of him was hanged, drawn and quartered. Though after the journey on the tail, that was probably a blessed release for the poor man. But it's not the only violence the cathedral has seen. The following century, a man called William was attacked on the steps of the west front. He tried to get through the double doors and claim sanctuary, but two priests locked and barred the door and left him to be beaten and left for dead on the steps. When the bishop of the time found out about that, he had the two priests excommunicated, which was considered a fate worse than death in those days. And after that, they actually closed the cathedral for what was called a period of cleansing. Place in the whole of Lincoln. This can be attested to by this rather nice 18th century gate behind me here. Remember what I just told you about gargoyles warding off evil? What that little chap up there is doing. He's keeping off the evil eye. He's warding it away from the building on the other side of the gate. You'll notice this little bit of road looks quite straight. That's because it used to be one of the entrances into the old Roman city of Lindum, Colonia. And Roman soldiers are heard and seen passing along this pathway. When they're heard, it's the brass bits on their armour clanking together. When they're seen, which is a lot more rarely, they're only seen from the knees upwards. Because of course they walk with their feet on the level of the road as it existed in their lifetime. And in the interim 2,000 years, with nearly 2 feet of stone, cobble, rubble and tarmac on top of the old Roman road. But the soldiers don't know that. They just keep using the pathway as they always have done. Interestingly, this building was a building site a few years ago, ground to a halt for 3 weeks because they found Roman graves and had to do the archaeology. Do be careful while we stand here. I don't want anybody knocked over by the severed head that bounces down here on occasion. This severed head belongs, would you believe, to a bishop of the cathedral, Bishop Hugh. Now, when Bishop Hugh died, he was buried in a lovely stone sarcophagus in the cathedral. But a bit later on in history, when they were doing the angel choir, they moved it, and his head came apart from the rest of his corpse. Somebody had a bright idea. We'll stick it on a plinth. Because by that time in history, relics or body parts of famous or saintly people, and by this time they've made Bishop Hugh into Saint Hugh, can be used to attract rich pilgrims to your city who come to touch them to gain what are called indulgences. I suppose you'd have to say they're a little bit like holy brownie points, get you to heaven faster. But as a holy relic, it's worth a fortune, especially on the black market round the courts of Europe. So two men decide they will steal it. They sneak into the cathedral, they put the head in a box, and they hide it under their robes. Their escape route passes the graveyard at the top of this hill. Going to find out a little more about that on the way back up. Graveyards in those days are not the neat and tidy places that they are today.